This is Twit.
Apple's acquisition of Beats Electronics has a lot of people scratching their heads, and a lot of people are saying, Mike, for the love of God, don't talk about this again. It's boring. It's a boring story. Why would Apple acquire a company that makes mediocre headphones and a streaming music service hardly anybody uses? Well, Michael Vakulenko, I hope I pronounced your name right, Michael Vakulenko, wrote a piece that was posted on the Medium site yesterday that has some really interesting ideas about Beats, the Beats music service, and the business model behind it. So welcome to you, Michael.
Hi there. Thanks for inviting me.
Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Almost.
Okay. Apologize for mispronouncing it to the extent that I did. Now, you wrote that to understand Beats, you need to understand what you called the Lady Gaga business model, which you described as the poster child of the economics of the new digital era. So what is the Lady Gaga business model?
Right. So, first of all, this particular post is just a sample of a much deeper case study we're doing on digital business models, really. And it's a really good example of how you need to look beyond current products and see what companies may become in the future by looking at how they leverage content, platform economics, or economics of co-creation to drive their core business. We see many examples of companies doing that in many different verticals, and Apple move to acquire Beats, really yet another good example in this direction. So how Gaga is linked to that? Gaga is not only very successful music artist, it's very successful business. And Gaga is a business really did many things that were never done before. And this is very, starts with very clever use of social media to create communities of fans. But looking at all the research around Gaga business, it's clear that Gaga is doing very good business around selling everything except music. And this was said clearly by Troy Carter, who is ex-manager of Lady Gaga, who said that really music sells everything except music.
Exactly.
So that brings us to Beats. Yes, Go ahead.
Yeah, so just to capture this in economic terms, economics, classical economics, if you will, is based on the concept of supply and demand. And I think everybody understands this, where you have a limited supply and you have demand, which is high or low or whatever, and where those 2 points meet, that's the price that's set for any sort of goods or services. In the case of digital music and digital downloadable content, supply is an entirely different thing. There is no scarcity, unless it's artificially created, but there's no scarcity in digital songs. If you post a song, one person can download it or 1 billion people can download it. It doesn't matter. There's no scarcity in the music. And therefore, ultimately, the price, the natural price for downloadable music is zero. And so the Lady Gaga business model, which Jimmy Iovine is very much aware of and into, and one of the reasons why, as I understand it, he launched Beats Music, is that Beats becomes a place where artists can take this thing that's essentially worthless. In fact, Lady Gaga herself said that her songs are not worth 99 cents. And if you're not a Lady Gaga fan, maybe you agree with that. But the whole point of this is to take something that has no scarcity, this is economic terms again, and you attach it to things that do have scarcity, things like concert tickets, things like Beats headphones, lots of products that do follow the scarcity model and therefore are worth a lot of money. And that's the whole point of Beats Music. Is that how you understand it?
Exactly. And this is actually not the new model. If you look at what Amazon is doing with content, you have many elements of that being implemented very successfully already. Of course, Amazon's core business is different from the one of Apple. And Amazon uses content to get people on board of Amazon services and keep them engaged, mostly. Apple actually is doing the same thing with apps and music's on iTunes as well. Even though App Store by itself is very big business, even though iTunes is very big business, Apple is not making profit or very small profit on content. And Apple executives were saying that on several occasions that, for example, App Store is being run just above the break even.
I've heard that Apple makes 1 penny on every song on average. I read that somewhere. I don't know if that's the current number, but I think a few years ago they were making, they would sell it for 99 cents and it cost them 98 cents to provide that.
It's a low margin business. And if you compare that to the margins they're having on iPhones, you know, the business model is going to be clear. Use the low margin goods to drive sales of the high margin goods. And this is what they exactly do.
You mentioned here that they also might want to make a business model that the musicians can control a bit better. And they've done that sort of before, but they weren't successful. Why do you think they haven't been successful before? And what do you think that Beats will offer them to succeed now?
Well, it's all about people who are running Beats Music and Beats. And you need to look at history of people like Ian Rogers, for example, who one of the key people there, and Jimmy Iovine himself is a very experienced guy in terms of innovating in music and has huge experience from Lady Gaga and other artists. So they understand this new economics very, very well. What they're trying to do now is to replicate that at scale, it's huge scale, not just work with specific artists, but create a platform that will enable artists to create businesses and through that drive business of Apple.
So as I understand it, the model we're looking at and the issue that we're talking about right now is that to a certain extent, the acquisition of Beats Electronics for Apple is not about selling headphones and it's not about using their technology behind the music service. It's about, once again, reinventing the business model for downloadable content. And what they did was they hired Jimmy Iovine, who's probably, I can't think of another person who's more expert and experienced at this reinvented business model, and also getting on board with Beats Music, which is already on the path to enabling this business model. Is that your understanding?
Correct. So it's all about what Beats, married to Apple, may become in the future and how that can extend and enhance the current business of Apple, which is more or less focused on devices. This is where the company makes most of their money and almost all of their profits.
Well, Michael Vakulenko, I want to thank you for coming on Tech News today. It was a fascinating article. I really appreciate it, and you're bringing some light to a pretty confusing acquisition, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, you can find Michael at on Twitter, and I'm going to spell that at MVAKULENKO, and also at visionmobile.com.